Excited to be here. My name's Mary. I work at Gamblin in our product support. And joining me today too is Pete Cole, our company president. We're real excited to show you a fun little painting about pumpkins today, using some of our 1980 oil colors and a few special colors from our artist grade oils as well. You should have gotten the reference photo ahead of time. I brought my little pumpkins here with me today just to brighten the mood a little bit while I paint. I'm going to start first by dispensing my colors out on the palette here. While I'm doing that, Pete, do you mind letting folks know the differences between our 1980 student grade colors versus artist grade?
Sure. So let me just start by talking about oils in general. There's no painting media that has the same power of communication as oils. Nothing else can carry the same kind of pigment load. Nothing has a broader range of mark making possibilities. And that's sort of what's really important about oils and what makes them so special. When you pick up a tube of one of our artist grade oils, you're getting the best from us. It is the best paint we can possibly make in terms of pigment, process, the people behind it. You're holding what we think is that color as good as it can possibly be. So you're going to, if it's important to you to experience color at its maximum, if it's important to you to have the broadest range of mark making possibilities, you're going to want artist grade oils, and they're worth every penny. Now, with that said, not everybody needs that. If you have a trade-off of I can only afford 6 colors in artist grade, but I could buy 12 in 1980, you're going to be better served by buying those 1980 colors and having more access to color, more possibilities rather than fewer. So that's one reason to consider the 1980 colors rather than the artist grade. If you're painting really big or thickly, again, in terms of money, it can be just too expensive. And with 1980, there's just so little compromise and really meaningful savings that if you're working big or if you're experimenting with new subject matter or new approaches, you're just trying to hash out a few paintings and just to get going, you're not going to notice the difference between artist grade and 1980, and 1980 is a great paint. Another thing is if you're looking to just have more muted colors in your paintings and more natural colors, then 1980 can work great, and you may find it easier to kind of have harmony in your painting. A lot of people ask us, well, if they're so much cheaper, what makes them different? The same pigment goes into our 1980 colors as in our artist grade. There's no compromise there whatsoever. They're made by the same people here in Portland, Oregon. We don't outsource these to another country. They're made right here and not too far from where we're sitting right now. And basically the difference is that there's a bit more linseed oil in them than the artist grade colors, and there's a bit less pigment. And then to replace that pigment, we use marble dust, which is a colorless extender that oil painters have used for 600 years now. That's it. So they're a wonderful product, and for many people, they're exactly the right thing. But for others, the just unbridled power of the artist grade colors is really what they need and want.
Thanks, Pete. And I really agree that sometimes if you want pure color, it's better to go with the artist grade. But if you're starting off, one of the main things we recommended folks use for this lesson today was our 1980 oil colors set here. This is a really tremendous value. You get a full palette of colors plus a tube of medium gel. One of the other really neat things about this panel is that the packaging itself is what I'm using to paint on today. They're made from our friends over in Salem, Oregon at American Easel. It's sustainably made birch, and it's already been primed. So the box that you get your set in is what you can paint on, which is kind of cool when you get to take your colors out on a test run. On my palette here today, I already have the colors out. We had the cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, cadmium red light, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and phthalo blue. Up here at the top, I got a little bit of our ivory black, titanium white, and then these three colors here are the special ones I've included from our artist grade oils today. Namely, there's titanium buff, which is a really lovely beige color. Radiant lemon. Now, if you didn't get this one, you can really easily get it, mix it yourself by taking the cadmium yellow and adding a little bit of white to it. But this radiant lemon is a special tint color we're going to be using. And lastly, this color called warm white, which is all of three of these colors I just talked about are exclusive to the artist grade line, meaning they're not in the 1980 line of colors. What I really like about warm white is that it has a slight temperature to it, a little bit of yellow warmth. And when we are painting the pumpkin later, this is going to be one of those really important colors for you to use. All right, so to get started, I brought with me my Gamsol jar. If you want to see that, I repurposed this from my own kitchen for my favorite type of jam. It's what I use to clean my brushes with, and I've put a Gamsol label on there. We have those available at the website if you ever want to print that out for your own studio. I'm taking my jar off because this little jar here is what I'm going to be using to dispense my fluid medium into. What we're going to be using is Galkyd for the sketching phase as I put my pumpkins into the right space on the panel. Galkyd is really useful because it dries very, very quickly, and it also helps impart more flow and more gloss to the painting. I mean, we think that Galkyd is one of our most popular mediums, to be honest with you. Pete, did you have any thoughts on Galkyd, why artists love it so much? And could you talk on that?
Sure. So Galkyd is a fluid medium, and but unlike and many artists, and since the beginning of oil painting, many artists used linseed oil to thin their colors, which is great. And if you're doing that at home and you like it, keep doing it.
Good.
But Galkyd is something that will really significantly speed up the dry time of your oils from a couple days or more to essentially overnight. And so a lot of artists really value that dry time, but it's certainly not for everyone. And we offer a broad range of mediums at different drying rates and different textures. So you can get exactly what you want that fits with your process.
Yeah, that's a good point. We make a number of different mediums at Gamblin. And as I'm using this Galkyd, I'm just putting a little bit of it, a sparing amount of it, in with my yellow ochre. And I'm using the yellow ochre as my sketching color, mainly because I think yellow ochre has a lot of really nice warmth to it. Now, when you're doing this sketch, I'm going to implore that don't focus on the details. This is the rough and messy part of our painting today. And what we're really trying to do is set our pumpkins where we're going to have them live on the panel here. So I've got my white one down. I'm not going to do the stem yet. I'm going to leave that for last. And over here is where I'm going to put my orange pumpkin. You can see I'm just not doing a whole lot of detail, just getting the basic shape laid down. And then we have our little squash, which I brought with me today to show you all. And what's important to note is that there is a little bit of space here in between the squash and the white pumpkin.
And Mary, there's a couple of folks wondering what type of brush you're using out there.
Good. So this is a pretty simple, small round brush that I'm using for this. Pretty great for if you want to do fine detail. I like that it's got a pointed tip to it. So I can use it either for doing line work like so, or for shading too, if you use the broad side of the brush, which I'm just going to do a slight indication of the shadows of my pumpkins now. But I'm not going to do a whole lot of detail on these shadows. We are just doing a rough outline of where they're going to eventually live when we get the real color stuff down. Sometimes this is referred to as the block-in or the lay-in stage for a painting. And then get this shadow here. One thing I really like about Galkyd is how it really helps make nice washes and build up subtle values of color. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. And the last thing I'm going to do is just a slight horizontal line from up here at the top left of the panel. And I'm just going to go down like this, slightly meet the pumpkin there, and then over. Kind of like if they were sitting near the edge of a little table. As you're painting this, know that we're going to have this recording available in case you want to view it later and paint at your own pace. We only have an hour today, so we got to go as quick as we can to show you. But I also wanted to point out there, if you just want to paint one pumpkin, that's okay. If you want to paint 7 pumpkins, go ahead. I'm doing 3 just to have it be nice and balanced, but if you wanted to do more or make your own, that is just fine. So now we're going to get to the really fun part, which is where you lay in the colors. I'm going to start here with the orange pumpkin. And to make a really, really nice orange, you get just a tiny bit of the cadmium red and a nice amount of the cadmium yellow. It's a higher amount of yellow to red. You can see there, that makes a pretty nice orange. Something else that I'm going to show you today that's going to help for a medium, check this out. This is the gel that is included with the 1980 color set. This is our solvent-free gel, and it's one of my favorites of all time, mainly because it's got a great texture and it's a good all-purpose medium. Similar to Galkyd, it is one of our more popular products. Pete, do you want to take some time to tell viewers more about solvent-free gel and why it just makes such a great medium if you're a beginner?
Sure. So for a lot of, we spoke earlier about 2 common mediums that people start with, refined linseed oil being one of them and Galkyd the other. And of course, both of them are fluid. And for me personally, I like to have texture in my work. And when you use a fluid medium, you lose some of that. And I also like a more moderate dry time, and Galkyd can dry very quickly, and
It's real sticky.
yeah, for some of you it'll feel sticky and grabby if you have a long painting session of maybe 2 or 3 hours. And what we're trying to do is make materials that give you exactly what you want and fit with the flow of your own creative process. And for me, Galkyd is like, hurry up, Pete, hurry up, Pete, hurry up, Pete, the whole time, and making my colors more fluid. And then it kind of runs all over my palette. So the solvent-free gel has a body that's very similar to oil colors. So when you mix it in, you don't get that kind of flattening out of your color the way you do with the fluid medium. And it also gives you a more moderate dry time. So some colors will dry a little faster, some will dry a little slower. And another nice thing about it is that it is completely solvent free.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, we hear from a lot of painters that they may be pregnant, or they may just be really super concerned about not using any solvent at all. this gives you an option. It's made from American grown soybean oil and American grown safflower oil, essentially mixed together and gelled. So you're working with vegetable oils very, very similar to the same vegetable oils that are in your kitchen and you're eating every day.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, I also agree that it's the natural way that these mediums feel is what really makes them unique and enjoyable. So for the pumpkin here, I took a little bit of that radiant lemon that I mentioned, that special artist grade color, and I used that to kind of bump up my orange mixture here. As you can see, it did a really nice job of making a lovely light orange for the highlights on this. And for the more shadowed areas of this, I'm going back to my round detail brush, and I'm just going to put a small amount of alizarin crimson in there, making a shadow color for the pumpkin. You can see it makes a slightly deeper red, and that's what I'm going to use to round out the bottom of this and to help create the impression of its little divots and little textured outside that it has. So this class is only going to be for an hour, but one of the nice things about oil is that it does stay open for a long period of time. You can blend for hours and hours and hours. That's why, as Pete mentioned, I really like the solvent-free gel for this because it just does a nice way of keeping your colors from getting too sticky and gooey on you quick. That's mainly why we only use the Galkyd for the initial sketch phase. All right. Grab a little bit of warm white, and to round off this pumpkin, I'm just going to do a couple highlights up at the top where the light is catching it. And that's all for that pumpkin right now. Next, we're moving on to the squash / gourd, whatever you would like to call it. To mix this, what I'm going to do is grab the titanium buff. The titanium buff is really nice because it's an off beige and it makes for really subtle greens or browns. For this one, I'm making a slightly off green color. And I'm just adding a little bit of our cadmium yellow to that. And once again, to add a little bit of flow to that, just a dab of that solvent-free gel. One thing I will say about the solvent-free gel is a little goes a long way. You don't want to be adding too much of this stuff into your colors. If you really overdo it, it can make your painting take quite a while to dry. While I'm laying in this color, by the way, I'm using my 1.5 inch slightly angled brush, one that has a nice little angle on it. I find that's really nice when you're making the nice smooth lines and getting a good clean line between colors.
And just as Mary's painting, if you guys have questions, feel free to put them on the chat, and Carrie is here standing by to answer questions that you've got. Regarding brushes, just since Mary touched on it, a lot of people will ask us, like, what's the right brush? What brushes should I use? And I guess the main thing is definitely use a brush made for oil paints. If you're looking at a brush or just using old brushes from watercolor or acrylic, you're not going to have a great experience. And I think the other thing to look for is a variety of sizes of brush. A lot of painters try to make marks smaller than the brush they're using, and it gets really hard and frustrating. And so if you're trying to make a small mark, consider using a small brush. And if you need to make a big mark, consider using a big brush, and you'll get more variety in your painting, which means more visual interest for the viewer. Another thing, I'd suggest is just trying to vary the marks you make in your painting. Sometimes you'll see paintings where the person used basically the same size brush, the same type of brush, and because they're right-handed or left-handed, basically made marks in the same direction throughout the painting. And one thing a painting teacher taught me is that a little bit of texture buys you a lot. And so if you have a variety of brushes, you can kind of mix up the marks, and you can have flatter marks and more blurred in the areas of the painting that aren't most important. And in your area that you really want to draw the viewer's eye to, that's where you're going to have maybe potentially thicker marks and more texture.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, Pete. Sometimes just having a variety of brushes makes all the difference, especially where I like to do thick highlights is that's when I do texture. So for this little squash here, I'm going to make a nice bright highlight up at the top here. Yes. So speaking of switching up our brushes, when I move on to the pumpkin, instead of an angled brush, I'm actually going to be using this very short, flat, bright brush, number 4. And the reason why I like this is because it's going to help me get these more detailed lines here in the grooves of my little white pumpkin. What I'm also going to do here, since I'm mostly done with all my orange and all of my squash color, is I'm going to clean it off the palette. And what I'm going to do is make a little blob of colors up here for later. So I clean this mixing surface. Gamsol always does the trick for cleanup. It's what I use for brush cleaning surfaces. Gamsol just always saves the day. Like if you get paint in your favorite sweater, sometimes you can catch it in time. Gamsol has really been one of those products that has liberated a lot of oil painters because it's much milder. Pete, would you mind touching on Gamsol too, and just why, if one is using solvents for oil painting, why it's one of the best to consider?
Sure. So, what is a solvent? The job of a solvent, one, is to thin your color. 2, it is useful for cleanup. And 3, it needs to evaporate completely out of your painting. And of course, Gamsol does all of those things. And there are other solvents such as turpentine that you can use, but they're really unpleasant to be around and
Bad for you.
Yeah. And so turpentine is trying to kill you when you are around it. It attacks your nervous system, and that smell that makes you feel bad or that gives you a headache, it's because it is bad. And it was used in oil painting for a long time, but it can be left completely in the past. Gamsol is a solvent that contains none of those harmful aromatics that are in turpentine, things like benzene, toluene, that you don't want to be around or you don't want your family around. Gamsol is completely non-toxic when used as recommended. Basically, don't drink it. And it is also reusable. So if you have a brush jar that you're using, as Mary is, and most of you probably know this already, but overnight those pigments will settle down to the bottom of that jar, and you can either reuse that Gamsol as is, or many people will eventually pour it off into a new container and to get basically a fresh start. But you can keep reusing and recycling Gamsol over and over again for a very long time, and eventually it'll just lose its cleaning power, but you can really get a lot of mileage out of it. And I'd encourage you to do that rather than just going and buying more.
Yeah, I bought a gallon of Gamsol that actually lasted me almost 3 years, and I oil paint on a regular basis. just to kind of emphasize how great it is to reuse over and over again. So I used a mixture of the warm white with a little bit of ultramarine blue and just a tiny, tiny amount of the ivory black in there too, to make this shadow color for the pumpkin. It's little wedges that it has. Next is where I'm actually just going to use the warm white just straight. I'm not putting anything in it. I'm just using that warm white straight from the tube with no other colors here. And then maybe just getting a tiny little dab of that solvent-free gel for a little flow. And I'm just going to use this pure white to put in the sides of the pumpkin here and give it that three-dimensional shape. Now, if you were using just titanium white for this, it would look really chalky and wouldn't have that warmth that we see in the reference photo compared to the white blanket in the background. That would be like titanium white. And what's nice about the warm white is it's got just that little extra bump to it in temperature that can make all the difference when you're color mixing. Now with this, I'm actually going to start laying in this white pretty thickly towards the front of the pumpkin, just to really emphasize those shapes. Going back to my shadow color, just going to add a few more shadows here. Okay, I'm pretty satisfied with this. I could work on it for a couple more hours, but for now, I think this little white pumpkin's looking pretty rounded out. Maybe just give it a little more here on the side. Next, we're going to be tackling the foreground area here. To do this, I am ditching my flat brush. Like Pete mentioned, sometimes the choice of brush really can save you or break you. And for this background, what I'm getting is another angled brush like before, but this one is a lot bigger. This one is a 3 1/4 inch angled flat brush. The reason why I really like this is because it does a good job of loading up color and getting nice, even brush marks in the background. For the main background, we're just going to be going into the titanium white. And then grabbing just a tiny little bit of that shadow color we used for the white pumpkin. Mix that in real good. Get a little bit of our solvent-free gel. And starting over here, I'm going to start working in this white. Oh, that's almost the same white as the actual panel itself. So what I'm going to do, just to give it a little more color, I'm going to put some blue in here. Oh yeah, there we go. That did the trick. Just a little bit of that ultramarine blue, and you have an off-white. Using a slightly blue-white is also what's going to help give the pumpkins their nice warmth to them. Because with color relationship, cool colors and warm colors tend to have a higher contrast when they're right up next to each other. There's just something very relaxing about laying in a nice background. Something meditative about it. up in here, making sure to use a nice big sweeping motion to get that space in between the squash and the white pumpkin. I'm going just up to the wash of shadow. We're going to put in some color for the shadows in a little bit, but for now we're leaving it alone. As I'm moving this way, I'm going to start having my background be a little bit more blue as it goes off into the horizon, kind of giving the illusion that it's going backwards in space.
And Mary, if you get a moment, there's a couple people that just want to see your reference photo a little bit better, and maybe it can move on top of the 1980 tubes or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I can do that easy.
Oh. Okay. Ah, I misunderstood. Okay. Folks want your painting is partially covered. Your paint, yeah, you're great. The painting you're working on is partially covered by the second window in the Zoom.
Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, awesome. All right, laying in that blue here. This part, really no special application necessary. I'm just getting that paint down there on the surface and trying to not mix the blue into my yellow. That is one thing to be careful of, because if you do, you'll get green really quickly, which is not our objective here. So be careful as you get around the edges where you have your orange and your yellow. That's where you don't want the colors to play with each other. And you can see here, this is why I really like the angled brush for this type of technique. I'm going to be going around the side here of the shadow and then pulling away. Okay, now on to the actual shadows for the pumpkins. To mix that, I'm going to start with what I already have here on the palette, but I'm going to be incorporating just a tiny bit of the ivory black. And when I say a tiny bit, I really mean that. You only need a little bit. Don't push it too far. And to add a little bit more warmth to that, we're going to do some yellow ochre too. And there is our shadow color. It's not too much darker than the background, but just dark enough for what we want. As your shadow meets the tabletop surface, use a really light touch and just try to blend these into each other, making a softer line. That's another reason why this brush is really helpful. It helps me get soft edges. Next, get the shadows over here. I hope people out there watching are getting excited for upcoming holiday season, Halloween and fall's here. It's kind of fun to do a festive painting for you all. All right, there we go. Now we'll do the upper part of the painting, which in our reference photo was just canvas, but I kind of like to use my imagination sometimes. And what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to take more of that warm white. Just going to use a palette knife to get a nice glob of it out. And I'm going to mix ultramarine blue into there. A really nice sky color. What I'm also going to do, though, just to kind of spice it up, I'm going to use a little bit of the phthalo green. Now, caution here, grab the tiniest amount. This phthalo is very powerful. A little goes a long way. I'm putting barely any of that on my mixing knife. So we get a slightly turquoisey blue. Okay. Cleaning the brush with my Gamsol. Might not be able to see it, but off camera here, I have a little rag that I'm using to wipe color off on. You could use paper towels too, whatever you feel. I like to use old t-shirts sometimes. All right, and then we're just gonna lay in that nice sky blue.
One of the things, as Mary's painting, one of the things we all struggle with a bit is, as artists, is finding the right colors to put on our palette. In our artist grade range, there's 96. And most of us can get done most everything we need with somewhere between 6 and 16. And so for those of you who have questions about this stuff, there's great resources on our website to learn about how colors behave differently, how mineral colors behave versus modern colors, for example, and to really help you get to the colors that are going to work for you and save you from wasting time and money with the colors that aren't going to do that well for you. So there's a lot of resources on gamblincolors.com. There's a lot of inspiration and information in our Instagram, which is at gamblincolors.com.
Yeah, go check that out.
At gamblincolors. And we also offer at no charge personal consultations that you can book through our website. And you'll actually be spending, if you book one, you'll be spending 15 minutes or so dedicated time with Mary to help figure out which of our colors are going to best support your work. So just wanted to mention those. And for us, we don't want to sell you a tube of paint. We want to help you to find your flow in oil painting. And that is really the other half of our work here. And it's really important to us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So if anybody in the chat had a question today that we couldn't get to, I really encourage you to go to the Gamblin website. You may likely find the answer there. And then if you don't, you can send us an email or set up an appointment with the website. And we are just always happy to help when someone has a technical question or needs maybe a little nudge in a certain direction. Always happy to help. Okay, so now we're just going to do the fun stuff to kind of finish up this painting. I'm once again going back to my small round detail brush here. This is going to be a lifesaver for this. This is actually my favorite part that I like to leave for last, are the really tiny details on a painting. And we're going to be doing the little stumps and the little stems on the top of the pumpkin. and also some slight line work on our squash here. I'm gonna start with the squash. It's kind of the most intimidating part. It's got a lot of lines in it. To do this, I'm just grabbing a tiny bit of phthalo green once again. Now this stuff is really, really powerful, this color. I said that before, and I'm not exaggerating. This stuff is really strong. So I'm just getting a little bit of it on my brush and I'm doing some lines. The lines also help create the illusion of space in the shape of the squash. Go. A couple little accent marks there. For the orange pumpkin, we're just going to go with straight ivory black for that, and creating it has a very short little stubby stem, like it was cut very short. Then add a small little highlight at the top. Going once again to the ivory black over here. And if your black and white mix together to make a gray, that's actually great. Kind of helps create a mid-tone for the stem. So starting here at the head of the squash, I'm just going to take my brush and I'm just going to pull it out. And what I'm trying to do here is mimic the shape of my shadow of the stem very subtly. Adding a little bit of a highlight at the end here. And then this is kind of the best one, is the white pumpkin stem. It's kind of what made me really want to pick it out. When I saw it in the grocery store, it had this slight little curve to it that I thought was just absolutely adorable. So we're going to nestle this stem down here, kind of towards the top middle. Now I'm going to actually load up this brush with a nice amount of paint. Get it nice and loaded up, get a little bit of gel in there for flow. Because when I go to do this stem, I'm going to try to do it in mostly one swoop, so it has nice accent and character to it. So we take it down and you go, whoop, just like that. That easy. And a little bit of a gray color. And what's interesting about the stem is it twists as it loops around. So I'm now loading up the detail brush with gray, and I'm going to be grabbing this right side of the stem, curving it around and having it go off this way. And then adding a little accent there. Little accent here. And by gosh, I think this painting is almost completed. So folks, this is when we get to the more fun part of the painting, because they have almost everything completed. Now all that's left to do are some subtle accents or fixing things, like cleaning up an edge here, softening an edge up there. I might even return to an old brush that I used earlier. Make a little bit of orange. Get some highlights in there. Really, at this point, you could do anything. You could put faces on the pumpkins. You could give them little quirks. Like sometimes pumpkins have little bumpies on them. You know, you can add like those, like get little dots here or there. And the same goes for the white pumpkin over here. As a last note, I'm just going to add some little subtle accents here. Using texture at this point, like we talked about before, just a little bit of texture at the top sometimes makes such a difference stylistically with oil paint. I'm going to use a little bit of this Radiant Lemon here. Such a nice color. That's going to be my accent color for the squash. Once again, using that angled brush to start down and just up. I like this part because sometimes you just start working with all your paintbrushes in your hand at once. So that really completes our lesson for today. If you enjoyed it or you'd like to share your painting with us, we would love to see it. You can send it to us on the website, or if you post it to Instagram, tag Gamblin Colors and tag Michaels as well. We love seeing what people made during the lessons. I would love to see your pumpkin paintings too. And like we mentioned before, if there was a question you had in the chat that we weren't able to get to today, please do let us know. We are really dedicated to helping out when people are either at a beginning level or a trained master. No matter what skill level you are, we're here to help. Just give us a shout. All right, well, thanks everyone. This has been a real pleasure. And did you have anything else to add, Pete, before we go?
Just a couple of questions out there from folks. Sort of, what do you typically do with the leftover paint mixtures that might be on your palette?
Oh, that's such a good, so good. And actually a really good one to end on, because right up here, I have some orange mixtures here. I'm going to come down to my mixing area here, grab this blue that I made, grab that beige. I'm going to grab all these colors. I don't like wasting paint personally, so you can see I laid out a lot for this demonstration today. So something you can always do when you're in this scenario, you have a couple options. Sometimes putting the paint in the freezer really helps, and that'll keep it wet longer. But if you want to do what I'm about to do here now, actually, I'm going to combine them all together up here at the top. And what I'm going to make is a recycled gray, and I'm putting my gel in this mixture too. And up here, I'm just going to mix those all together. What this is going to be is a monochromatic gray that's unique to you. Oh, wow, that's nice. Now, what you can do with this gray, what I would encourage you to do, you can get empty paint tubes that you can dispense it into and save it for later. It's one of my favorite things to do when I have a bunch of colors left over on my palette, is make a recycled gray color. Okay.
And Mary, how would you store that gray, or for kind of next time paint?
Good thing. You could find an airtight box to keep it in, something with a good seal, or if you buy collapsible tubes, that's really where you get the most out of it in the long run, is if you put that stuff in a tube.
Okay.
Great. Well,
so once again, just as a recap, definitely check us out on Instagram at gamblincolors.com. And then, as I mentioned, there's a lot of resources on color on our website. If you go to gamblincolors.com and look under experience color, there's just a ton of good information and support there. And then you definitely, if you want a little more personalized help, please do book a personal color consultation with Mary. Thanks to all of you for attending, and thanks to Mary for painting and talking at the same time for an hour. It's not easy, folks. She makes it look easy. So
Thanks, Pete.
we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.